Okay, Chris speaks back with Brandon Mosley for our BCS State of Alabama podcast, and we got GOP nominee for Ag Commissioner here with us, Corey Hill. So, Corey, man, back to the runoff. And people don't realize how important the ag position is, but it's kind of like I don't want to say a issueless race, but it's not something where you see people really go at each other like in the light governor's race or Senate or Attorney General. What do you think accounted for your victory? Was it the alpha endorsement that really helped push you over the top, or it seemed like you had a little bit more money? What do you think was really the deciding factor?
I don't know that exactly. I'm not a political scientist, and there's a lot of science to this business, but the Alpha endorsement was key to my race. I knew going into this thing back 2 years ago that I needed the Alpha endorsement, and if I hadn't gotten it early on, I don't think I could have stayed in the race because I was just so much underfunded compared to both my opponents. But I think going into that final stretch, the fact that Jack Williams supporters came over probably and voted for us. Jack supported me publicly. Jack and I probably targeted the same voters, and so I think the voters that were supporting Jack early on saw me as their candidate potentially, and it just worked out to where we were victorious in the runoff, and I was proud of that. But and we had Cattleman and Alpha too, and Alpha started it, so then Cattleman came on. So the working families, the hardest working people in Alabama is of course our farmers, and they got on our team early, and those guys work. They don't just give you money. They go out and vote. They put up signs for you. They call their friends and neighbors. So that's a big deal. People outside of politics just think about Alpha and their money maybe, but there's more to that than just their financial commitment when you get their endorsement.
And it seems to me like you have an advantage with North Alabama because it seems like with the chicken farms and all, there's a lot more farms that are commercially viable in the North. Am I wrong on that?
I think you're right. I mean, if you fly over Alabama in an airplane, there's a lot of long metal roofs on the ground under you. There's a ton of poultry operations, and Coleman and Blunt and Marshall County is the top three operating counties in the state poultry, and cattle's pretty strong. Coleman and Marshall and Blunt's got a strong cattle population as well. So, although we're kind of been in a lot of areas, Huntsville, even Marshall County, somewhat, we're still pretty rural in North Alabama. A lot of rural pockets in North Alabama.
I noticed in the closing weeks of the runoff, you were able to get on TV a lot more. Did you have an influx of cash come in to help you in those few weeks?
I, I think no, not really. I mean, we had more than we did. I had different people, I guess, give a little bit of money, first time money. We had some of our regular folks support us again in the runoff, but we had a little bit of new money, but not a lot. But what the difference was, I think we kind of in the runoff, it's not as crowded, so the rates are less. So we actually spent the same amount of money. We just got on TV more because I think the rates dropped just a little bit because of the crowded spots that were more available. But we actually spent within a few $1,000s the exact same amount of runoff that we did in the primary.
Um, if you look at the latest campaign fundraiser, y'all had to spend your money in the runoff. John Wall had to spend his money in the runoff. Barry Moore had to spend, his money, in the primary and in the runoff. Um, yeah, only one that really has a bunch of money left over is Tuberville. How reliant are the Republicans on Tuberville getting out there and spending that $10 million dollars and maybe raising a couple of million more in order to get that Republican vote out in the general?
I don't know that answer. I haven't had those conversations, but I think from hearing, I've been able fortunate to hear Stadhagen speak a couple times, and they are motivated to get the vote out. They're working towards that and doing different things around the state. So I think there'll be a push to get the Republican vote show up in November because the Democrats are rallying, they're getting motivated, and they're getting more organized, and they're going to show up and vote. And I tell people all the time at events on math, they talk about we're a Republican state, we're red, you got this, congratulations. I said, hey guys, it ain't over. Uh, I said a while ago, there's going to be a time when a Democrat gets elected again in Alabama, and it's going to be sooner than later if the Republicans don't do their job, because the Democrats are doing a good job getting organized.
Um, let me start. Yeah, I got to interview all three of y'all in the agriculture race. I think me and Brandon interviewed Christina last summer. And all three of y'all seem to be great candidates. Were you surprised at your margin of victory in the runoff?
I didn't know what to expect. The Monday night before the race, I I had thoughts I was going to lose, so I had no idea what to expect. It's my first time running a statewide race. I'm not a polling guru. I didn't even see a lot of polls. I told them early on, if you ever send me a poll where I'm ahead, don't send it. I don't want to see it, because the whole time I campaigned like I was third man in a 3-man race, and that's what I'm doing still now. I'm not giving up, not quitting. But what surprised me the most, I think, and a lot of people, was the first race in May where Jack finished third and Christina and I were first and second. I thought at that point it'd be Jack first and me second, or Christina second, and that'd be close second. But I think that surprised people the most was how that race turned out.
Changing topics here for a minute. I know you're not the Commissioner of Agriculture yet, so you don't have to worry about this for a few months. But how closely are you following this New World screwworm infestation in Texas, which just seems to be growing leaps and bounds by the week?
I am following that very closely, because we are in the cattle business. We ship cattle out west a couple times a year out to Kansas, and we got 120 mama cows on the ground here now on our farm, so it is close and dear to us. And actually, the price took a hit the last couple of weeks. It's not terrible, but has been a little downward turn. I read something on that just about every day that pops up on Newswire. I actually was in a meeting a few weeks ago with Dr. Tony Frazier, our state veterinarian, and they're on top of it. They have a plan with Texas and the federal government, and uh, they're just monitoring that. So the Texas folks, I think, are going to fight hard to contain this, because people think about the cattle industry, but a lot of the cases we've seen are in domestic animals, dogs and goats and those things. It gets in your pets, of course, but the deer hunting in Texas is a huge financial gain for Texans. So it gets in deer, you can't control that. Don't even know what's happening. They just die probably because they're not being looked at every day like cows are. So Texas folks are working hard to contain this, and that's a benefit to us, because they want to protect their deer hunting industry as well as their cattle industry.
Back to something you touched on a while ago about Democrats being energized, and a Democrat could win one day. I think of all the races going on, no disrespect to Senator Jones, but you've got by far the toughest opponent. You've got somebody who's first got state government 30 years ago, an iconic figure. I've heard some Republicans express concern. They think that former Commissioner Sparks has a chance to win this race. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I tell my supporters that if you look up and down the Democratic ticket, my opponent is probably the most qualified to serve in the job he's running for compared to other officials. So yes, he is concerned. That's why, as I said earlier, I'm fighting like I'm a third place guy in a 2-man race. We're not giving up or quitting. We're working every day to win this thing. Uh, I don't know. I'm not going to tell you our plan, but we do have a plan, and we're going to work hard, and we're going to win in November. So we sure,
Um,
me or any other Republican candidate, can't take anything this for lie. For lie, we gotta assume that we could get, all of us could lose, and we got to fight like we're this fight of our life.
for those of us who grew up in Alabama in, the 80s, 70s, and 80s, we used to have a bunch of dairy farms here. And now it seems like all the dairy farms, for the most part, have shut down. I know of a few in Fayette County. Um, is there a way to get some of them back so we actually start drinking Alabama milk in Alabama instead of having to import it from Wisconsin or California?
A lot of our milk we sell in our store in Kentucky. We used to get it out of Tennessee, but we don't. It don't come there anymore. Um, That's a complicated industry. I've told people the farming industry gets kind of shafted years ago when this whole industry was created. Whoever got our pay plan together was we're the only industry that can produce a product and not choose our price to sell it for. We're always told what we're going to be paid for everything we sell in the farming world. So the big I guess the big producers or the big processors or bottlers of dairy milk has controlled that price for so long, and they just got to where they were pinching and squeezing out the dairy guy and wasn't paying them enough to, as expenses went up to grow those cattle, feed them, and keep them healthy. The profits wasn't there, so that's why you saw them close. Of course, you know that, but I think what we can do is there's a lot of new dairies opening up, farm to market kind of folks, young beginning farmers. There's one we went to in Russell a few weeks ago, had a ribbon cutting. They got a $1.2 million grant from the Alabama Department of Agriculture to expand. They milk 16 cows, and they do a fantastic job bottling their milk. And their goal is in 3 to 5 years be bottling milk to sell in Russell County schools. I mean Russell City schools over there, Russell City schools. That's their goal, and we're going to help them facilitate that where they can. Because I don't know of anything much more exciting than having Alabama grown products on these kids' plates in schools in Alabama.
Were you facing such a formidable opponent? Do you foresee the party getting you some money in the fall to help, secure your victory?
I'm certainly going to ask. I don't really know how that's set up. We hadn't had those conversations yet, but I would think the Republican Party would help all the statewide candidates. So I think that should be yes on that.
Along with the milk deal, I know the Indians have built a processing plant in Atmore that's up and operational, although they've had some labor issues which have slowed getting up into full production. How far away are we to the point where we can have like Alabama branded steak? So we have a lot of cattle in Alabama, but they're all finished out in Texas and Kansas and Nebraska and Oklahoma and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um,
The Brandon, the hindrance right now is federal regulations on those processing facilities, and the Indians have done a great job, and they have an outstanding facility. I was able to tour that at their grand opening a couple years ago, and they'll get there, I think. But like you said, they're having labor issues and have to work through that. But we were, I wasn't involved, but the industry was hoping that could be a model for what we could do in other parts of the state, or even they could get big enough to help, process enough beef to sell around the state. However, there's a federal law in place, not in place. It's going through Congress now. If it passes, that it will ease regulations on Alabama beef packers. So if that passes, you will see, I think, a few. Now you're not going to have a beef processing facility open everywhere in the state, every county, but you'll have a few regional ones open up because it'll be less overhead to operate. So we're hoping that passes. And if that does pass, the local state ag departments, which will be us, could write those rules about how that is set up and how that processing is done. So we would have a hand in that and setting that up where they could open up and process Alabama beef and sell it, of course, in Alabama. And that's what we hope happens. And from what our congressional friends tell us, that is probably going to pass at some point this year. So we're excited about that.
I remember last time we talked, I think you've got a grocery store up there and was talking about prices of chicken. I was kind of wondering about this right here. The other day I bought some chicken tenders, and I think it was like $1.79 a pound or something like, or maybe $1.99. And a few weeks before they was $2.39. What causes the market to fluctuate like that?
I think it's supply from. I don't mean supply and demand like you think about. Everybody's buying chicken this week. I think it's just supply from the processors. Like we process about 22 million chickens a week in Alabama. So you
Wow.
think about where all that goes. You're talking about what you see at your local, over at S&S or Food Value. You see that on in the rack there, but most of that, a lot of that goes in the restaurant industry. You got all the chains, all these like probably Wayne Tyson. They all have contracts with multiple restaurants because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So if they have a sudden uptick where somebody orders more, hey, we got a issue, we need more chicken tenders, a big corporate customer like that, they're going to honor their wishes. So that's going to create a little supply issue temporarily. So it's going to jump the price up. Now, for us, kind of pulling the curtain back a little bit, the way that works for us is we order chicken like on a Monday by 9 o'clock, and they deliver it to us on Tuesday. They kind of that way the chicken's always fresh. It's not sitting in the freezer somewhere, or they kind of process the things what their orders are. Also, along those lines, we get a price change every single Friday. Like you might have a case of Bounty paper towels might not change prices for a year. However, commodities such as beef and poultry and pork, it changes weekly. So we're going to see a price change every single Friday. It might go up a penny or two a pound. It could go up $1 a pound. We never know till we see that price on Friday for what's going to be coming for us the next week. So it does change weekly. Sometimes it's like sometimes if it might go up, if it goes up a nickel a pound, we just leave our retail price the same. We don't want the customer to see that. We don't absorb it and not shock the customer, so we don't. But if it goes up enough, you have to adjust your retail prices.
I just had discussed this issue before. My understanding is like Georgia, because that Atlanta farmers market attracts, the big groceries and the big chains and the big restaurant chains. Georgia are more easily able to market their product, in quantity than guys in Alabama. We do have a farmers market in Birmingham, but it doesn't attract the same level of like national chain groceries and whatnot. How can we change that where we get more, where somebody brings, 500 watermelons or, a truck full of tomatoes, he can be assured to sell that product in Alabama, and not take a bath on the price.
Right. Yeah. I don't know the exact answer to that, Brandon. I do know that the farmers market in Birmingham, as massive and big as it is not controlled or regulated by the ag department in Alabama to some degree. There's kind of run by their authority there. So I've had actually, I got to learn more about that because I've had a lot of calls and concerns as I've been campaigning about that farmers market. And so, but to answer your question, I know us and independents like where over there where Chris is at and S&S and those guys over in Cleveland, the independents typically you'll see them buy from local farmers. Like when we have watermelons in our bin in the store, we'll put out they're local, they're Marshall County watermelons when they come in. And but the chain stores, for some reason, due to traceability, biosecurity, whatever the reason is, they don't necessarily let their local stores, in a lot of cases, buy from local farmers. Now, they may have the local farmers send it to their distribution center in Birmingham or Huntsville or Atlanta, and they go out to stores, but you really never know it's local Alabama product in a lot of ways. So, uh, buying at the independent stores, you're typically going to get more local stuff. But that's a big thing we're going to work on, focus on, is finding a way to get Alabama products on these plates in Alabama. I mean, I think that's something that we got to focus more on. Y'all know there's a lot goes on with the ag department. I mean, you could do something different every hour of the day and not do the same thing twice. So we got to focus on a lot of things. But one thing we're going to put some energy in is making sure we support our Alabama farmers. So we got to keep these guys in business. And so whatever we can do to facilitate that, we're going to work on that from day one.
No, along the same lines of the question I asked you a while ago, and maybe the same thing with the supply and stuff. Like I noticed, I was buying eggs the other day, and the jumbo eggs was like $1.09, and the medium eggs was like $1.29. I was like, why is the medium eggs higher than the jumbo?
That's a supply issue. It's weird about. Well, of course, it wasn't like 2 years ago when eggs got to be $7 a dozen. It was like probably I don't know, probably it was in the spring. It was before Easter. Eggs were kind of a little higher than they should be, but we got an email one day that they've oversupplied their large eggs, and I could buy. We were selling like I think for $2.29 a dozen that particular week. I could have bought them that week for $1 a dozen if I wanted them. I could have bought as many as I wanted, and I did. We bought 30 or 40 cases of them. And instead of $2.29, then we was able to sell them for like $1.49, $1.39, and drop that price. But it's kind of weird. Like, I don't know how that supply demand thing works on their wholesale end, but when they got eggs sitting there, they got to move them. So for some reason, I don't know if somebody canceled an order or what the problem was, but eggs were high, and then we'd been being told they're in short supply. They're going to be high for a few more months till after Easter, and then boom, we get an email, hey, we got a deal on eggs. You need to buy some. So we did. So who, it's there's not a right answer for that stuff. It just kind of depends on a lot of different variables.
Wouldn't a lot of it just be in the warehouse space? Like if you're killing 32 million chickens, all of a sudden, you have a tight deal. It can't just pile up in that warehouse waiting to move.
That's true. There's a ton of cold storage. Of course, don't put eggs in that, but there's a ton of cold storage in Alabama, and they're building a new facility in Boaz to store poultry with. Once it's processed, put in these freezers. So there's a ton of chicken in freezers around the country right now, waiting to be shipped, overseas, around the country, and that's where some of it goes. Is it goes directly into freezers, waiting to be processed to the next level.
So I'm talking about S&S in your store. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure you have this stuff too, but like, S&S will have seafood, tuna and stuff. Is that from Alabama, like for shipping or fishermen that's bringing that stuff up, or?
I can't actually. I don't know. I know. I don't know. I don't know what S&S does. Although I'd encourage you, if you live in that area, to shop with them. Those are great folks, and they run a good
Oh, I
business.
do. Yeah.
But of course, you know that. I mean, you go in there, you can't really walk. There's so many people. But those are good guys that do a good job, and they're good people. But we see a lot of seafood. Even we see a lot of seafood in our store where the label on it is not even U.S. And that's something we got to fix
Okay.
too. Now, the legislature did change something a couple years ago to put that under the Sweet Grown Alabama family, and they've been promoting that better, and they're doing a little bit with that. Ellie is at Sweet Grown Alabama, so I think you'll see an uptick in Alabama products come going forward the next 2 to 5 years of Gulf seafood being promoted more. And we just got to get the consumer educated to know that it's better than what you can buy otherwise. And catfish is a great example. We're the number 2 catfish producing state in the country and have been for years. But our catfish guys are struggling because there's such an influx of foreign catfish. And, it don't always say on the label, it'll say foreign. It don't say Vietnamese. But in Vietnam, they grow their catfish in sewage lagoons. Now, I don't know of anybody that wants to eat a catfish that's been raised in a sewage lagoon, but we do it not knowing where it comes from. So we've got to educate our consumer what they're eating and make them want to eat the Alabama grown product.
A few years ago, I met with some people. I think an article on they were trying to cite a hemp fiber plant in Winfield and ultimate production. Is there a push to bring, site a something like a hemp fiber plant in Alabama? Because, trucking hemp fiber all the way up to like Kentucky, just isn't cost effective. And of course, nobody's building a hemp fiber plant unless there's a lot of, few thousand acres of hemp being grown here. So how do you get that cart before the horse to get that industry rocking and rolling here in the state?
I'm not familiar enough with that, Brandon, to speak. Excuse me, ed, educated on that, but I do know that when hemp first came on the scene many years ago, several years ago, there's a lot of people grew it and lost a lot of money in it because the market wasn't there like they thought it was. But there is a market for hemp fiber, but we got to everybody be at the table and figure out where we're going to sell it before we grow it, kind of thing. And I think there's an opportunity there, but I'm not familiar with anything being built in Alabama right now or any discussions about that.
So let me ask you to hear back to S&S, and I love that place, man. I mean, they have the best deals on meat around, for around here that I go. But I go up there and I get like every couple of days, I'll go up there and I'll look at the discounted meat. And they'll have steaks
Yeah.
that are marked down. What is the I mean, the loss there in like some of these meat markets? Because I know, not everything's going to sell.
That's right. You try to limit that, of course. Now, the you throw away a lot of the packaged meat, the bologna, the sausage. You can't nothing you do with that. Once it goes bad, you got to toss it in the dumpster. But now, like the red meat, a lot of times you can either mark it down, and if it still doesn't sell, we can put that in hamburger grind, like that 73% grind. That's what happens to a lot of it. Or if you have a kitchen, a deli, you can cook it in those, in the kitchen, and that's what we in most stores do. If you throw it away, that's absolute last resort. You try to catch that before. But if we mark down a ribeye that's not selling, we cut too many. We try to mark it down to right at cost or just a pinch below cost. It's not. We try to mark it down like $2 below cost. If we don't have to, we'll cook it or use it before we do that. But we try to just get our money back at that point with it.
I know up at Randy Owens' farm, Tennessee River Music and Cattle, they have a store where they're selling burger meat and steaks and roasts and the whole 9 yards. I think Randa said their big issue is that when you slaughter the cattle, you get more ground beef than you can move. So, they found some restaurants to take the burger meat. You can sell every steak that you cut, but are there more operations looking at, actual on the farm sales like they're doing with their store?
I think there's more out there right now than you probably realize. I know several friends that are doing on the farm sales, and the Cattlemen's Association helps promote that. But the Sweet Grown, back to Sweet Grown, Alabama, their database, anybody can look that up. You can just search for beef on there, and it'll pull every one of them up that's selling that from the farm. And those guys that are doing it are seeing continued growth and continued success. But like you said, they got to find something to do with that hamburger meat. There's a liver and there's a tongue and there's other things that nobody wants coming out of those cattle also. But I remember probably 15 years ago, we were getting a group up to kill some cows, and we was trying to sell the beef to a bunch of friends. And one of the guys or girl said, "Hey, can I just get all ribeyes?" And I said, "You get all we can get." And she said, "Well, I don't want any hamburger. I just want ribeyes." Well, it don't work that way. About 22 or 25 ribeyes is all you're going to get out of a cow, depending on how you slice them. That's the best you can do. So that's why you see so much of that ground beef. There's only a couple roasts in each one. There's only 22, 24 ribeyes in each one. So you can't just make a cow into 300 ribeyes and put it in the freezer. It don't work that way.
I got one more question for you. What is that cut of meat? Oh God, I get it all the time. That it's like probably the cut of ribeye. Because I'll find it for like $5.99 a pound or $4.99 a pound. Is it a chuck eye that they call the poor man's ribeye that comes from like higher up
Yeah,
on the there? This it's just a little bit more
yeah,
tougher, but it has all the marbling on it.
probably. I hadn't cut meat in about 15 years, so I've lost it. I lost track of what everything is, but that sounds right.
Yeah.
And yeah, the poor
Yeah,
man's ribeye is a more
you're
common name
thinking
out
of
for us
chuck
folks out in the
steak.
country. Yeah,
It's the
it's a
shoulder.
little.
The shoulder, is the chuck, and chuck roasts and chuck steaks are all cut from there. The higher premium meats are down the back in the loin, and then you get into the
Okay.
back end, you get into the round and the sirloins.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they call
See,
it poor
I
man's ribeye.
I need I need to take Brandon with me on the trail. He knows his meat cuts there. That's good.
Got that elementary science degree, it's good for something.
That's right. Well, we have a big chart in the meat room for new guys that come in. It's got a picture of a cow up there, and it's got everything drawn out where the cuts come from, and make those guys study that. And they have to. So sometimes when a new guy's in there and the customer asks something, he has to go back there and look on the cow and see where it comes from before he can cut it.
Yeah, I used to do that at Winn Dixie. I've been, worked in the meat market for a while. Or we've had you for over 30 minutes. I know you've got a lot of stuff going on, so I don't want to take up any more of your time. I really appreciate you coming back on and talking to us, and hope we'll talk again for the fall. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with before we go?
No, I appreciate y'all. I don't see you out much, Chris. I see Brandon out a good bit at different events, but you must be on the witness protection program or something. 'Cause I don't see you out like I do Brandon. But I appreciate y'all promoting things and do what you do. But now, same thing I'll tell y'all, I tell people is I meet on the street. we've got to go vote. And I don't mean, I heard you, I think it was you one time, Chris, say that, we had 10% show up and vote, but it was the 10% that was educated, and maybe we don't want the non-educated ones voting. But this November election, seems like people want to wait till then to decide, and they don't know that it's been somewhat decided. So we got to do a better job of that, get people to get engaged earlier. But my point is, we've got to go vote in November. We can't take anything for granted. The Republicans got to show up because the Democrats are engaged. They're going to continue to be engaged, and we've got to win with this election. We've got to show every vote. Every vote's important. We've got to show up because every vote counts.
Thanks so much for being on, Corey.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank y'all. Thank y'all.